find out that Brennan flew bin Laden himself in '01 to Iran to harbor him, to roll him out if needed for '04.
And Gina, I've been told too that he's also the guy who created the whole fake Barack Obama identity persona.
Yes. That's why I call him Dr. Frankenstein. Yeah, that's true. Now, let me tell you a little last piece here, because I want to get to the heartbreak here of two administrations harboring. Two administrations harboring their asset for political purposes, and you better believe that John Brennan is the center of that. And he is free falling right now, and he's gonna hurt people. He's gonna hurt people. Dr. Frankenstein. He's gonna hurt people. Dr. Frankenstein. He's free falling right now. He's gonna hurt people. Two administrations harboring. He's gonna hurt people.
Dude, he's also the guy who created the whole fake Barack Obama identity persona. Identity persona.
He's gonna hurt people.
We got your neck in the news. We got your neck in the news. We got your.
Tonight, a late night update. We look into the dwindling support of Donald Trump, which now people are questioning these very questionable commuted sentences and potential pardons of some of the most nefarious people of the 21st century. All the while, we're being summoned to a war nobody asked for, nobody approves of, by a so-called ally with a very, very dangerous adversary now on our borders. Welcome, everybody, to Real Deal Media's late night update. The oldest franchise here at Real Deal Media. I am your late night host, Dean Ryan. And this is our news radio edition, as it is the last week of it. What you saw right there was kind of a hors d'oeuvre of what's to come here tonight. Tonight is the incoming invasion. That's the name of this episode. Right here at Late Night Update, is we're going to be getting into what has been shared with me regarding some major intel, and it could be tied to John Brennan, as you saw me there. Just I believe that was season 1, a version of me discussing just exactly how and who this dangerous character John Brennan, who he is. As he is now being rushed now in motion of a major indictment of the creator of Barack Obama, the former CIA head, John Brennan, and a very dangerous man. And you can just see it on his face. I don't have to tell you. So we're going to talk about that as it has something to do with the intel drop I'm going to be sharing with you here tonight, as well as the oncoming onslaught of a war that is building brick by brick and hour by hour, as we are zero dark 30 nearly, if not already. We're going to be talking about that here tonight, as well as some other pressing things that are now coming. Is some another pardon, another commuted sentence is now being whispered for another major monster of the 21st century. I'm going to tell you about that, as well as major pushback now coming against the National Guard, not just ICE anymore. And this one's coming out of the Bay Area. Yes, what does that have to deal with? Speaking of deals, well, the United States Farmers Association, farmers in general, are all up in arms, and they got their pitchforks and torches ready to go. And why is that? Something to do with Argentina. We have some major World War III news coming down the pikeway with the Trump and Putin meeting, Is it on? Is it off? Is it still a thing? We're going to talk about that, as well as Ukraine and some major news coming out of the IDF that is just, well, it's just unfortunate. But yet we have to face the music and the facts. We'll talk about that. And Pam Bondi is on a major crusade against hate speech. Just when you thought well, just when you thought it was over with the last administration, I guess it's not. So we'll see what that's all about. And major international news, we have Canada, who's now in the crosshairs of Israel, as I shared and predicted with you, like the great Karnak that I am. I'll tell you what that's all about. And the EU seems to be tightening their grip as if they couldn't even tighten it anymore on the people of Europe and the UK, for that fact, regarding the internet in the new digital ID age, and just how disappointing that is. And also another former Napoleon 2.0, the former president of France, is in the news. I'll tell you why that is, as he was clicking his heels as he was marching somewhere. Very interesting. And a major breakthrough of omission of sorts regarding the origins and creation of the COVID-19 84. I got an incredible clip we're going to try to play for you with Tucker Carlson, as now it's coming to fruition that the COVID virus, or whatever the hell that was, from a bat who loved us, well, maybe it was designed to love a certain type of people that never really got sick and took the miracle jab and just had nothing happen to them. Also, we have some real deal tech with Amazon, with planning on doing, and Uber's jealous, saying, wait, that's our idea. And finally, a real deal studies with smaller men and their walking styles. Yes, it's just incredible, these studies, aren't they? Okay, before we get started, we are broadcasting live now. We're broadcasting live on Real Deal Media's right there on Rumble. I'm going backwards tonight, as the dyslexia tells me. Yes, we're on Rumble, the new graveyard, as well as Dean Ryan TV over there on YouTube. Can you believe it? We're still there all these years later. Got it back, lost it. And as well as the real Dean Ryan over there on Facebook, which, by the way, I should say that with Facebook, if you're trying to find the lives or can't find them, well, you can find them on Rumble, Brighteon, elsewhere, because now Facebook not only prevents us from putting covers on our shows, but they delete every live video after 30 days. Yes, they went after my archives. Can you believe that happened? It really pisses me off to no end. Okay, so we're going to get started now, and also have a major announcement too. Sadly, that I'm going to share with you towards the break here tonight. And it pains me, but I have no choice but to share it with you. Okay, let's get started with some late night headlines from around the world and in your late night neck of the woods, shall we? Well, this now brings us to the late night headlines of Texas. And let's get to it, because Texas is a major player and always targeted, and I don't like the sounds of it, but it's the reality of where we are now. So here it is. They're now saying Texas is going to be the epicenter of the new measles outbreak. Now, this is just before we even tell you. This is coming on the heels of a lot of people who know a thing or two, as well as the people who really are designed to know a thing or two in the nefarious columns, like Fauci, who are talking about the biggest second wave that we've ever seen since 2020 in that era. Yeah, and a lot of people are speculating, what is it going to be? They tried to rehash the bubonic plague. They're trying to say, this new form of COVID, or it's coming from cats, or the bird flu is giving it to cows. Well, Dr. Zhivago has nothing on this, on the 2025 doctors of today. Well, now the state, they're saying, with the highest number of measles cases, as the data shows us, as the science never lies, shows unprecedented surge across the United States, but it's really stemming from Texas. Well, there's no surprise there, is it? Well, the U.S. is now seeing a rise in measles cases that is unprecedented in the 21st century. All the way back in 2000, the disease was declared and eliminated around the country. Well, not so fast. The CDC said, well, look at what we have here. Well, the Center of Deception Control and some say prevention or ignition. Well, they're now reporting more than 1,500 cases of measles as of October 14th, and the highest number of annual cases since the U.S. declared measles eliminated in 2000. Yes, I believe they said mission accomplished. Well, just today, in this year alone, there's now more than 1,500 cases that are now linked to various measles outbreaks across the United States, and 216 isolated cases that have been reported. A real shame, they say. Well, now with only 285 cases reported in just last year alone, well, this year's numbers of cases has now increased, and get this now, 460% increase. Now, many people have analyzed the data, which points to unprecedented trends just in this century alone. But they're now saying the hotspot seems to be coming out of the Lone Star State itself. However, just last year, Minnesota and Illinois reported the highest cases with 65 and 67. And the CDC said, well, we got to change that and make it Texas. So if you really go back 5 years ago, well, measles have infected only 1,200 people around the country, including large outbreaks in Orthodox Jewish communities, if you can believe it, in New York. No word if it was under the Chabad synagogue with all the rest of the tunnels and the just unusual rabbis crawling out of the sewage. Well, the highest numbers of measles, yes, as we've been saying, have now come out of Texas. The outbreak started just as late as January, as soon as Robert F. Kennedy got into power. All of a sudden, the measles decided to re-show their ugly infected face once again. They're now tracking cases nationwide and will be updating. The CDC says we need to be careful, cautious, and get a new measles miracle jab that should be, if not already, around the corner. Many infections, and they've said, have now been connected to an outbreak over there in West Texas. If you recall, where there was an explosion about a decade ago, and where former Supreme Court Justice Scalia was murdered peacefully in his sleep. Well, two children, they say, who, and this is very key, listen to this in the story. They say that two children who were not miracle jabbed against the disease died. Now, this is very key. This is very key because they're going to try to get everybody miracle jabbed once again as this new wave of something, disease X, which didn't really pan out. They're trying to go for disease, probably what's next, Y. So this is what they're aiming for. They're aiming for the unmiracle jabbed people. Now, the outbreak, they're saying, has now quickly escalated because of the unmiracle jabbed children. And they said it spread into neighboring counties over there in Texas, infected at least 762 people in West Texas alone. Now, the state health officials who declared the outbreak in West Texas over on August 18th, and they declared it a major outbreak. And after no new cases were reported, well, they stopped updating the CDC and their panels. So there you have it right there. They've confirmed the first patient who died. Now, this is another one, a key point here. Now, the state and local health officials confirmed that the first patient who died and passed, well, he too was unmiracle jabbed, school-age child. And the second was an unmiracle jabbed 8-year-old girl. Neither children, well, neither of them took the CDC's incredible poison that they put in a needle, or as they call it, wisdom. Well, health experts point to lower miracle jab rates as the reason for increases in preventable diseases like the measles. So let me tell you here, as the CDC, who's all over this, they're kind of like what the ATF are when these just school shootings happen. Well, you see the ATF and you see the FBI there probably the night before at the local Holiday Inn. Well, the CDC is no different, as they're now passing out sheets that show that 93% of the U.S. kindergarteners who were unmiracle jabbed against the measles during 21 and 22, well, they were affected, and it's only growing. Well, the fear, you see the fear there? They have a product to sell, and we have the product to shove up the rectum, as we're not going to take it anymore, to quote that line. And it really busts my hump, doesn't it? Well, speaking of that, speaking of getting busted, well, now this is another daunting reality now, as the Puff Diddy case. Well, there's now some questions of whether he's going to be pardoned, commuted sentence, clemency. Can you believe it? Well, this is coming out of TMZ, the number one source of, well, something. The White House now communications office is now saying a story is not entirely true, as now Donald Trump is now considering commuting Diddy's sentence as early as this coming week, according to a high-ranking official. And according to the source, the president, Trump is now facilitating on a commutation. Well, insiders have been told that the White House staff member has been urging Trump not to commute the sentence, but other sources state the obvious that, quote, Trump will do what he wants, and we're told Trump could set Diddy free as early as this coming week. Well, just to remind you, Diddy's serving a 50-month prison sentence for violating the Mann Act, and many men in general. He served 13 months, and with credit, he could get out around 2 years. But none of that matters if Trump commutes his sentence. As you know, Trump commuted the sentence of former Congressman George Santos just recently, as of last Friday. Many people know almost immediately after Diddy was sentenced earlier this month, his legal team was in touch with high-ranking White House officials who have the ear of President Donald Trump regarding the commutation of, or even, dare I say, pardon. Just days later, Trump told the media he was aware of the ask. Well, Diddy fell out of Trump's grace when he supported Biden in 2020, if you recall, but Trump did not slam the door shut on showing Diddy some mercy. Many people are told now it's squarely on the table. Well, how do you like them apples? First, it was Ghislaine Maxwell, who's most likely going to be a commuted sentenced, if not pardoned, and now Puff Daddy. Yet you look at Roger Stone, you look at Stuart Rhodes, and a whole host of other people who we don't even know that probably deserve a pardon, a commuted sentence at the very least. But now Puff Daddy is going to be the recipient of that with Ghislaine Maxwell. Unbelievable. Continuing, well, here's something that's quite unbelievable too. That takes us now to San Francisco, as this is a very pressing item now, as San Francisco leaders now push back against Trump's National Guard threat. Yes, this is coming out of the AP, the most untrusted name in news, right next to CNN. Well, in this case, Donald Trump has been threatening to send the National Guard troops to San Francisco, while blasting the California city as a crime-riddled and ridden city, immersed with fecal matter. Yes, and that's just the politicians saying its residents are clamoring for federal help. Well, however, local and state leaders say that it couldn't be farther from the truth. Noting overall crime is down, and the city has started to turn around its downtrodden pandemic image. Residents are workers for that fact, out in downtown this week. Well, they said they're puzzled and concerned about Trump's threat. Here's a quote from one of the mayors. Quote, "This is a safe American city," Mayor Daniel Lurie told the AP. "We got this in San Francisco." Well, however, the Republican president has now referenced crime as his justification for possibly sending troops to the city, roughly 830,000. Well, he's deployed the Guard over crime concerns over there in Washington, D.C. as of late, where he's direct control with the National Guard now. And Memphis is another place where the Republican governor supports the presence. However, over there in Los Angeles was the first city where Trump deployed the Guard, arguing it was necessary to protect federal buildings and agents as protesters fought back against mass immigration arrest. Continuing on that, well, he also said, regarding Portland, you might have heard, well, residents and leaders over there in Portland were surprised by Trump's attention when he described the city as besieged by violent protest. In reality, many have said nightly protests were small and limited to the area outside a federal immigration building, or there were some arrests for violence. The demonstrations were the less intense, more than ever, than those that roiled downtown back in 2020, if you recall. So there is major pushback, many have said, with many struggles too, but who knows what the truth is, and sometimes you just don't believe the truth, do you? That's how that one goes, and that's some headlines for you. But before we go, a lot of the farmers in the United States have really faced a tough time in the beef section, I guess you could say, the beef sector. Well, now there is a new deal that's on the table now for farmers. but not exactly American farmers. Well, listen to this now. The administration is now suggesting the U.S. will buy Argentine beef to bring down prices for American consumers. Now, how does this work? Well, that's right. This is a new, some say quagmire, but a new offer that might change the perception, maybe of Argentina. Well, now as the United States could buy Argentine beef in an attempt to bring down prices for the American consumers. Well, here's what Trump said. He said, quote, "We would buy some beef from Argentina. No steak sauce needed." Well, the Republican president told reporters amid the Air Force One flight from Florida to D.C. that he could do that and it would bring the beef prices down. Now, Trump promised days earlier to address the issue as part of his efforts to keep inflation in check. Just so you know, U.S. beef prices have been stubbornly high for a long time, and ain't that the truth? Have you seen the cost of burgers lately? For a variety of reasons now, including the drought, reduced imports from Mexico due to a flesh-eating pest in the cattle herds over there, not to mention the wars. Well, Trump has been working to help Argentina bolster its collapsing currency with a $20 billion credit swap line and additional financing from the sovereign funds in the private sector ahead of midterm elections for his close ally, President Javier Milei. So far, the farmers of America seem to be peeved, as many people are now asking, where's the beef? Isn't that something? Speaking of which, that's now going to bring us to World War III. Yes, it is. Well, now this is really something that's pressing. Just the other day was a joyous occasion of an announcement. Now people are bewildered, bedazzled, and bothered. That's right. Well, this is coming out of the New York Post. As now Trump and Putin's meeting is now canceled after Russia insists a goal to conquer Ukraine, and that will not change, has not changed in the forecast and outlook. It's not going to change ever again. Well, Trump no longer plans to hold a second in-person summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin or anything like that in the immediate future after Russia rejected Trump's demand to stop the war in Ukraine along the current battle lines. Trump is now quoted saying that, quote, "I don't want to have a wasted meeting or wasted time. I don't want to have a waste of time either." Well, the cancellation followed a Monday call between Secretary of State Little Marco Rubio and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, which a source familiar with the conversation, said demonstrated the Kremlin's unwillingness to commit to Trump's strategy for peace. So far, Bathhouse Marco and Foreign Minister Lavrov, had a productive call, a White House official has now said. Therefore, an additional in-person meeting between the Secretary of State, the little secretary that is, in the foreign ministry over there in Russia, is not necessarily necessary. And there are no plans for President Trump to meet with President Putin in the immediate future at the time. However, hours later, NATO announced the alliance's Secretary General Mark Rutte, who shares warm relations with Trump, and some say even warmer relations with Marco, wink, wink, would be in Washington this coming Tuesday and Wednesday for an unannounced discussion because their future remains in the hands of the Americans, just like other countries out there. Well, no further information was provided about the nature of Mr. Rutte's visit. Well, isn't that just puzzling? Speaking of that, well, here's another thing. Shortly after this was announced, Zelensky is now happy because he's just found out the progress of the Patriot missile deal that Trump and him are now having. That's right. Ukrainian President, the drag queen himself, Vladimir Zelensky, confirmed that Ukraine is now finalizing a contract with the United States for 25 Patriot missile systems, a critical boost for Ukraine's war effort against Russia. Each system costs approximately $1 billion. Can you believe it? Ukraine is exploring financing options, including a proposed $150 billion reparations loan backed by frozen Russian assets. Meaning that's a lot of blow. Well, acquiring the Patriot system remains a logistical challenge due to the production queue of the countries. Very, very bizarre. Zelensky's push for the Patriots missiles underscores Ukraine's vulnerability ahead of a winter. It's going to be deadly as Russia intensifies strikes on energy infrastructures in Ukraine as a whole. Well, there you have that. Zelensky happy and me not so happy. Me not so happy. Okay, so that's how that one goes. Now we have another one. This is now a new fact has come to light. Is now the BBC has now done the tallying up, and the IDF is now responsible for 60% of the deaths over there in Gaza, as they've now discovered that is the children make up a huge percentile of that. This is a little report, a little clip from the BBC. I'm going to play it for you right now. Here we go.
On over 160 cases where children have been shot in Gaza, and found that in 95 cases, the child was shot in the head or the chest. In most of these cases, the victim was under 12 years old. The cases we found run from the first weeks of the war up to July this year.
Well, there you go on that one. That is another stat that the powers that be do not want to go out, and we must give it some light while we still have some ourselves. I'm going to be sharing the intel with you just briefly, but I have to share the story with you first now as we go to Real Deal Politics, because I'm going to beg the question to the viewers or the listeners out there for tonight of exactly who's the hidden hand, that something we need to discover. Well, this is now Real Deal Politics now, as John Brennan, as you saw in the cold opening there, a little piece I made 5 years ago. Wow, isn't that something? Well, now a criminal indictment is now pending. Many have said it's already done, signed, sealed, and delivered. Others say, well, return to sender, if you know what I'm saying. But let me tell you about this now, as this is coming out of the Federalist, and many other publications are now taking note that John Brennan, the former head of the CIA, is now going to be indicted for criminal espionage. At the very least. Yes, Brennan, the former head of the CIA, was, they're saying, involved with the Steele dossier. Just for starters. Well, we also know a lot more than that, don't we? And I'm going to tell you a lot more than that, because they're trying to pin him on that, which the statute of limitations has now reached its peak. Yes, it has. In this case, I'm going to share with you that John Brennan, and this takes me down back to memory lane. John Brennan personally flew Osama bin Laden, who was a CIA asset named Tim Osman, who fought alongside the Americans in Afghanistan. Personally flew him with him to Pakistan in order to roll him out during an election season, whether it was him or a dummy, a lookalike, but to roll him out to make Obama look like the hero, to get him over the hump so he would win the 2012 election. And so far, that's when we had the takedown of the Obama, you remember, and then the burial at sea. Some of these things you got to remember. But now he was part of that. He was also one of the mentors and creators of a character named Barack Obama. He gave him the name Obama as a slap in the face to the United States, to the American people, following the 9/11 attacks. He gave them a fake name. It's just incredible. Well, now that seems to be changing, as the House Judiciary Committee now referred former CIA director, the Dr. Frankenstein himself, John Brennan, to the Justice Department for criminal prosecution just today. This just happened, over allegations that he, quote, knowingly made false statements to Congress about his role in the Russian collusion hoax. Well, in a letter today by the Attorney General Pam Bondi, obtained by many publications out there, the Judiciary Committee Chair Jim Jordan over there argued that, quote, Brennan made numerous willfully and intentionally false statements of material fact contradicted by the record of established by the House Permanent Select Committee of Intelligence and the CIA themselves. Making false statements before Congress is a crime and undermines the integrity of the committee's constitutional duty to conduct oversight. I mean, it's such a light charge compared to what he's done to usurp this country. And he was also a registered communist following the late 1970s and what they called a Wahhabist Islamic, well, I should say patron at this point. Well, the referral highlights numerous instances in which Brennan allegedly issued untrue remarks when testifying before the Judiciary Committee in May of 2023. Among them are the comments the former CIA director made when discussing his agency's role in helping craft the 2017 Intelligence Committee assessment that advanced the false narrative that Russia, yes, Russia themselves, developed a clear preference for Donald Trump and aspired to help him win the 2016 election. And let me tell you, this put Russian and U.S. relations back at least 30, if not 40 years, so about 4 decades. And this Russia collusion hurt a lot of people, and it gave us a new McCarthyism, a Red Scare in this country. And there's been no accountability really for anything. And I'd be surprised if there was real accountability for this. And if there is, and the next guy who gets in office is someone of the Democrat nature, well, they might get a pardon or commute sentence. And for all we know, Trump can do that himself, the way things are going. So there you have it. But this is a dangerous man. This is a man who has really, really done his best to undermine this country, what it stands for. And the fact that he was the head of the CIA and worked with Clapper, who was the head of the NSA, to conduct Operation Hammer in this country, which illegally spied on politicians, media personalities, and individuals themselves to find the dirt on them. It was such a replica and mirror of what Israel does to us. You got to wonder who's really jealous and reflecting on who they're. So we'll see what happens, but I'm not holding my breath because I can't seem to do that anymore. But now let me tell you the intel that has now been shared with me. Well, the question of how is the United States going to get dragged into war? In the war as in with Iran? Well, I've made the case in my thesis that, for instance, the blackouts that we just experienced briefly yesterday was a beta test of what they want to try to do to the adversaries of China, maybe Russia, but also to self-inflict us even further to blame China as the cyber attackers. Because they have to weaken China, they have to weaken Russia before we march into war with Iran. So the question remains of how are we going to get there? Well, I've made the case, well, and they've made the case too, that, well, they first tried to do it and blame the first assassination attempt on Trump last year. Well, before there was even a just speck of information or evidence of who it was, well, you had Netanyahu, who was just, BB on the spot, who said it was Iran who did it. And then again, they tried to say Charlie Kirk, the assassination. Well, it was Iran. Oh, but we'll go with a liberal Antifa guy who might be MAGA. We're not sure yet. Do we see this? So what better way to do this than to bring jihadists into this country? And this is what I received, and then we'll find out who the hidden hand truly is. Well, I received word today that now the Border Patrol themselves have been ordered to bring busloads, accommodations, and accompaniment across the border into places of Texas and throughout the country. We don't know exactly where they're going, of military-aged men who have been stated to be, quote, jihadist. Well, that's interesting. So the question is, if that's the case, and we're still monitoring this developing story, if that's the case, then who is behind it? Is it Israel, who wants a kinetic domestic war here of jihadists doing Operation Gladios all over the country? Or is it John Brennan, who's looking at some, libel, just laws that got him for lying to Congress, when there should really be treason, espionage? But is it Brennan who's behind it? Did Brennan make a deal with Netanyahu? Who's behind it? Because who benefits is always the question. What is the motive? Well, you could say both of them benefited, or do they have a secret handshake and deal behind the scenes that are bringing these people in? And who's in charge of the Border Patrol? Well, we know Mark Levin, for instance, the ultra Zionist, sits on the board of the DHS. There you go. He sits on a council board. Him and others like him, and other Fox News personalities, go figure, are sitting on the boards of these major homeland securities types of organizations that are allowing this to happen. And does Trump know this is happening, and do people around him know that this is happening right now? Also, if we know this is happening, and we also know certain people who are providing the arms, the weaponry to certain hub stations, one of them being in LA County, other one in Toronto, which then begs the question, oh, what's the fate of Canada going forward with this kind of intrusion, invasion brought to the domestics here? So when the military general the other day said that the United States will definitely be facing a conflict of sorts that will bring us into war, what does he know? And is there truly a struggle, a civil war within the military? It kind of seems that way, as we are now looking at a major 9/11 moment that is going to be brought to us by the new outbreak that they want to have, as well as jihadists, which could very well be Mossad. Makes you wonder, and so we're looking for that answer here. So that's what's happening with Brennan, and that's some of the news that we're now getting. And we have a few more stories here. I'm going to push a pause on this, and as we go to break now. But before we go to break, I want to make another announcement too. I just received word today, and for many who have been watching Real Deal Media for the last 5 years, you may be familiar with this story. But if you don't know, just to give you a quick briefing on it, I was caught in a very bad situation about 4 years ago, roughly around Anaheim, California, where myself and my associate at the time, Mr. Brandon Solo, were caught in between a trafficking ring at the Sonesta Hotel, where we saw a baby cell happen in Lifetime and took it upon ourselves to try to do something about it, only to be confronted by the cartel and a syndicate that was greater and bigger than what people realized, including ourselves, that had included the local police and the EMTs in a very Pulp Fiction kind of situation where our lives were endangered in a hotel that we were staying at, where we witnessed this, became on fire. A fire started and we fled, which brought me to flee the state itself for a couple of years. Well, my associate Brandon Solo, many of you may remember, he used to do a lot of shows with me back then. We met each other at an Airbnb at that time. And we did another show together, Suspicious Sightings. You might remember that. So a lot of this was very classical stuff. I just received word today that Brandon Solo has now passed away due to congenital heart failure. And it's a sad state of affairs, since considering I never got a chance to reconcile with him due to fears of monitoring dangers, as he did try to contact me 2 years ago to try to tell me that there were still dangers that were targeting him and I, which left me bewildered. But he passed away just a couple of days ago, so I wanted to share that report. And going into the break, I'm going to lead with the film that we did together that captured all this happening in real time. A little trailer of that era from a movie called The Underground Traffic, which is going to take us to break, and I'll see everybody on the other side. What you see here is what they call family fusion centers. You see them usually at the borders, but now you're seeing them more and more come to the inland. On the early hours of February 15th, 2:45 a.m.
There was a missing child identical to this child.
What the hell are we going to do?
When danger comes to you, then what are you supposed to do?
Everything went completely black. There was nothing.
Talk about all these atrocities around the world, and nothing right in the middle of them. So
It's an area that's being used for transporting something.
there is an underground tunnel system that goes throughout Los Angeles.
It's not getting a lady for the night. It's definitely deeper than that.
Had to make our decisions in real time.
We are freaked out.
Neither Dean nor I asked for this,
We're freaked out. Like, we got to go.
but we were confronted with it.
This ain't no Europe. Like, this is America, and we're coming for you. Welcome back, everybody, to Late Night Updates Incoming Invasion episode, our news radio edition. I am still Dean Ryan, your late night host here, who is waltzing with you to midnight and beyond. That was the incredible Mike Adams, as we share the arts around here, and what a fantastic job he did. Is Neon Mike. But yeah, yeah, if we have a lot of new people. Yeah, that was seeing that trailer that we saw during the break there of the underground traffic. It really brings back a lot of just memories there that you kind of stack away as another friend and someone associated with Real Deal Media has now passed. That makes three that I worked with, and then if you include the spouses of the people that were here, that's five, I want to say. and we've lost 5 viewers, 5 to 7 that I can think of at the top of my head. We've lost a lot of people, and I remember thinking in 2020 at some point on air saying that not everybody's going to make it, and I didn't know how true that statement was until you actually lose the people. So yeah, this one, lost a big part of the story here. A gentleman who experienced one of the most dangerous times in my life, escaping that whole scene there and being right in the center, the epicenter of a child trafficking syndicate in Anaheim, which we found out Anaheim, Santa Ana, that whole area is the most trafficked place in California. And you look into it and why that is. You have Disneyland, you have the intertwining freeways, you have all the businessmen from around the world, all the different hotels. It really is something. And, speaking of Disneyland, and I'm going to do a bigger story on this when I come back fully next week, which, if you don't know, yes. World at War returns Monday, the 27th. Monday, the 27th. Full throttle World at War, like you remember it. Or My Name is Mud. My name is Mud. So my name might be Mud Monday. Anyways, it was a dangerous time. I'm lucky to be alive. And, I remember at the end of that, when I say goodbye to Brandon for the last time, little did I know, who had a lot of conflict and conflicting things in his life. We gave each other a hug, and we said goodbye, and we just knew we survived something that you would probably only see in the silver screen. It was unbelievable. It was surreal, and we were there. We survived it, and we lived through it. And there's a lot about what happened to me in that time frame that makes no sense. Makes no sense. And then I got, to get pulled over twice in a 3-block radius by state troopers. That was unusual. Phone turning off and on. I mean, there was a lot of eerie similarities to the Ramsey case that I found myself intertwined with. Not too much, not that far from, when this happened, just prior. So, anyways, so God rest his soul, Brandon Solo. Another one bites the dust, sadly. So we're going to continue on our trajectory. We're going to continue on our trajectory. Okay. Anyways, let's get to this now. We have some real deal politics now. We're going to continue on our way there. Well, continuing with some politics. Well, now the White House is they're doing their best to preserve the peace deal with Gaza. At least they're trying, they're saying. Well, the White House works to preserve Gaza deal amid concerns about Netanyahu. That's right. Yes, this is coming out of the New York Times, allegedly. Well, the Trump administration now strategy is to try to keep the Prime Minister, Bibi Netanyahu, over there from resuming an all-out assault against Hamas in U.S. Now, U.S. officials are now saying, although the homes in Rafah are now being burned as we speak. However, the White House today worked to hold together the Gaza peace deal, as American officials said they were increasingly concerned that Netanyahu could dismantle the U.S. brokered agreement. Well, there's no could, there's he will. There's no could when there's he will. See, I didn't know we have to be English teachers around here. Well, the vice president over there, J.D. Vance, was headed to Israel today, you might have heard, where he joined with Steve Witkoff, as Trump's Middle East envoy is in full effect, as Jared Kushner, the most loved in the Trump family. He was there as an instrumental part of the brokering deal, as well as Elon Musk, who's going to be profiting from the new Gaza with casinos, golf courses. I'm sure it will just do everything to desecrate anything that was there prior. As the new Trail of Tears, it's said. Well, Trump warned that he would allow Israel forces to eradicate Hamas if violence in the enclave continued. Interesting. Well, here's a quote. Here's a quote from him. He said, "We made a deal with Hamas. They're going to be very good. They're going to behave. They're going to be nice. And if they're not, we're going to eradicate them if we have to. They'll be eradicated, and they know that." Now, Mr. Vance's expected arrival was meant to add an extra symbolic layer to illustrate the administration's commitment to keeping the deal intact. The administration brokered a ceasefire deal, well, just this month in a 2-year war anniversary between Israel and Hamas, the very created, financed, well oiled terrorist machine created by Netanyahu. But a new round of violence just this past Sunday has now highlighted the fragility of a 10-day ceasefire agreement. Now, according to the Israeli military, 2 Israeli soldiers were killed and another was wounded when Palestinian militants launched an anti-tank missile at an army vehicle. Several Trump officials, in lieu of all that, speaking on a condition of anonymity to discuss their private conversation, said there is concern within the administration that Netanyahu may vacate the deal altogether. The strategy now, the officials say, is for Mr. Vance and Mr. Witkoff himself, and even Kushner, to try to keep Netanyahu from resuming an all-out assault against Hamas, but not many, if any, are holding their breath. So there you have it right there. There seems to be little to no faith that this will even work out, and I agree to that. I agree to that because any time in the history of any kind of peace deal with the Palestinians, there's just one of these moments that, they don't, they don't want to have peace with Israel, because as we know that Mossad works in theatrical ways, and they could get people to fire a missile. They could shoot somebody, and it will never be televised as the IDF did it. It'll look like the other side did it. I mean, this is the kind of thespians at the greatest form we've ever had to analyze. And soon we're going to have to deal with, because I say that to you because this is happening now, where the IDF has now been given orders to fire upon will if U.S. military is in the way of operations. As we found out yesterday, U.S. military is there to be an enclave of food aid to the Palestinian people. They're the entourage who are delivering such goods, who are now being encountered with Israeli women themselves, who are now, like the protesters we've seen here abroad or domestically, who are standing in the middle of the street, not just as protesters, but they're bringing their own baby carriages and children to stand with them in front of the U.S. aids. As this is happening too, it's now been reported that an American journalist has been ambushed by Israeli settlers themselves as he was led astray by the IDF as he was trying to cover the situation of the delivered aid food. And he was talking about and expressed how he was ambushed instead and now is lucky to be alive. More on that story soon. So there you have just the Hamas, just comes out of nowhere. But now upwards of 85% of Gaza is completely destroyed, and they're still continuing now. All right, here we go now. As we say that, now we're going to continue on this one. That brings us to Attorney General Pamela Bondi, whose crusade against hate speech is not noble, but is quite baffling, to say the least now, as AG Bondi's crusade against that, following the Charlie Kirk murder, tests the conservative principles themselves, I'd say. Following the Charlie Kirk assassination, Attorney General Pam Bondi declared a crackdown on hate speech, causing backlash across the political spectrum and exposing divisions within the conservative circles over free speech versus government intervention. Isn't that the truth? Well, now Bondi, who incorrectly claimed that, quote, hate speech is legally actionable despite U.S. law, only prosecuting speech in narrow categories like incitement, true threats, or defamation itself, not subjective hate speech. That's right. Well, figures like Eric Erickson, and Matt Walsh condemned Bondi's stance, emphasizing that while social backlash against offensive speech is valid, well, government punishment violates the constitutional principles of speech altogether. Well, after the backlash, Pam Bondi attempted to reframe her position, stating only speech threatening violence is unprotected. But the damage was done, eroding trust amongst free speech advocates. Yes, it was. And furthermore, in closing, the incident reflects a recurring pattern where crises, whether it's 9/11, the COVID 1984, J6, something of that nature, triggers the calls for expanded government censorship powers, undermining the very principles Kirk and his movement fought to defend. The irony, it's blinding and it's hateful. Yes, it is, and that is some real deal politics, which is now going to bring us to some real deal international. Usually we take the Concord, but this time we're walking. Well, as we were sharing the news coming out of the almost ceasefire, won't it work? Well, Israel is now targeting Canada, as I felt, as my emotional stature told me. As now Israel urges Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carnage to drop his pledge to arrest Benjamin Netanyahu. The nerve, the gall. Can you believe it? Brazen. What a request and a demand, and what a favor they're asking for. Now, well, this is coming out of Reuters now, as now Israel urged Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carnage to drop his pledge to honor the International Criminal Court's arrest warrant for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu if he traveled to the country of Canada itself. Yes, that's right. Well, the home of just incredible Canadian people who are awake. Yes, and incredible ginger ale. I think you know what I'm talking about, Canadian Try. Well, yes, Carney was asked today in an interview with Bloomberg, published last week, if he would fulfill the commitment of his predecessor, Justin Trudeau, to arrest Netanyahu on war crimes charges if he came to Canada, to which he replied, quote, yes. Well, here's another quote. He said, yes, we believe that Prime Minister Carney should, of course, reconsider this and welcome Prime Minister Netanyahu to the leader of the only Jewish state and democratic country in the Middle East, to Canada. An Israeli government spokesperson, Mr. Shash Radzian, told reporters. Well, the ICC, the International Criminal Court, issued the arrest warrant just last year, if you recall, for Netanyahu for an alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity in the Gaza conflict. However, Israel rejects the jurisdiction of the Hague-based court and denies war crimes in Gaza altogether. And I can't think of a time where they're not denying things. Well, the head of that, the spokesperson, said Canada's decision to recognize a Palestinian state was, quote, prize for terrorism. And it had, quote, only poured fuel on an anti-Semitic fire in Canada. Let me translate that for you. That means they're going to punish Canada, you see? This envoy that's coming from the southern regions into the United States, well, you better believe they plan on going into Canada, because this is also a plan to wipe out the Chinese influence in Canada, and we see this happening in Australia. It's coming. And just like I shared with you, there's a weapons hub coming out of Toronto that's issuing weapons to who? I'm sure it's going to be jihadists under the thumb and control and oversight of the Mossad. You heard it here first. And that's how that one goes. That's how that one goes. Okay, so here's another one here. This is coming out of, the EU now. You know, a lot of our viewers all over the world, some of them who are in Europe, England, have had troubles watching the show, have had interference with their signals, trying to view shows outside of their country just to get the news about what's happening within, because you can hardly, if any, ever find what's happening in your own neck of the woods. You have to go out. Well, there's a reason for that, and now I think we know. The EU seems to be tightening their grips on the internet, but also they're tightening the grips on the digital age verification, sparking privacy and free speech concerns, where Pam Bondi said, yes, that's my boy. The EU is now pushing for strict age verification on platforms like Google, Apple, Snapchat, and YouTube itself, requiring users to submit official ID documents via a centralized app. Critics warn this erodes the online anonymity and normalizes mass surveillance, linking the internet access to government-controlled digital IDs and identities as well. Major platforms must now disclose how they prevent minors from accessing harmful content. You see that? The road to hell is always with good intentions. Well, that's right. The harmful content. They're very concerned about, just what the children are going to consume. But it's okay to give them miracle jabs, isn't it? Well, for instance, Snapchat must explain its under 13 ban, while Apple and Google face scrutiny over age rating systems and safeguards themselves. Now, the conservatives want mandatory ID checks for all users now, effectively ending online anonymity itself. And it left just oppose. Now, many people who are opposing this, they oppose the age controls, warning of censorship risk in disappropriate surveillance. A study now commissioned found that age verification is, quote, necessary but not feasible in democracies. That's right. Now, the DSA over there already enforces censorship of disinformation with vague definitions. And we see this happening in Germany. If you say something about the health world, the medical world, if you question the science, well, what do they do in Germany? They come and arrest you. Brussels, the same thing, and as well as, yes, the UK, which is now a second world country, if you ask me. Now, for instance, a crisis mechanism grants Brussels emergency powers to impose draconian controls on social media during undefined threats. And they are framing it as child protection. These measures risk normalizing the digital ID requirements for all online activity. Many critics fear tech giants will comply with backroom censorship deals, turning these government bodies, bureaucrats, into binding surveillance and speech control regimes by 2026. Another reason why the EU, the European Union, needs to go down the drain alongside NATO and some other people. But that's the nature of reality that we are living in the digital age, aren't we? Here's some other news to close up the Real Deal International coming out of France now. A man who I first dubbed the Napoleon 2.0 until he left office and Macron took that title where he's now Napoleon 2.0, but with a twist, as in he's married to a tranny. Well, you might remember Sarkozy, Nicolas Sarkozy. He was applauded today as he made his march to prison with his model wife. Well, that's right. The former French president found guilty of criminal conspiracy salutes crowds who were singing the French national anthem as Nicolas Sarkozy was clapped and cheered as he headed to jail to begin his 5-year sentence after being found guilty of seeking to acquire Libyan funding for his 2007 presidential run. And he will be this is the first time I think we've seen a major former president go to prison, but he went to prison with a huge round of applause. Sad. And then finally, there's major conflict happening right now in Ireland. This is somewhat new in the past couple of hours now, as Irish police have now been attacked with missiles outside a migrant hotel as protests turned violent today as a African migrant over there in Ireland raped a 10-year-old girl. It's a developing story, and it's gotten wild over there in Ireland. And I know the people of Ireland are pissed off over their open borders, free migration. It's completely changing the Anglo-Saxon world as we know it. By design, it's called the Kalergi Plan. Learn it, hate it, just don't love it, and do something about it. And I think the Irish people are. Insider says that after they're done with this and get rid of the migrants, that Bono's next. That remains to be seen. No word from the edge at this point. Well, I know that brings us to Real Deal Health. This is something that's very interesting. Now, you might have heard Bobby Kennedy talk about how the COVID virus seemed to have skipped the Khazarian Jewish race. And we thought it was just a conspiratorial blurb. It was out of context, disproportionate, maybe even filled with intoxications we've yet to figure out. Well, that may be the case. Well, let me tell you a bit more about this before we get to this next clip. As the COVID-19 had been engineered, many have said, who were within, engineered so that the Ashkenazi Jewish race were immune. That's right. Well, an insider said it's scientifically true that there was a finding in a scientific publication that the people of the Jewish ancestry, which line they're from, one was more heavily impacted than the other. The Ashkenazi Jews were completely immune from it all. And that's a direct quote, by the way, from RFK Jr. He said just a handful of years ago. He also continued, just to refresh your memory here, he said that what we also know is the fact that now it's true that the virus was lab created, which means they can literally design a bioweapon to target those receptors, which means they have the potential to target certain races. So there you have it. And we see this happening. And we see when you're first born in this country, they draw blood and then they take it over to the Pentagon for the bioweapons. That's right. Ask him how the MMR miracle jab has turned out for everybody. Well, here is Tucker Carlson talking about it. And why don't we take a little gander and a little listen, and we'll discuss after.
Of course, the New York Post led the charge against him, of course. But that COVID could be tailored. In fact, for whatever reason, COVID had disparate effects on populations.
That's absolutely true. I mean, that's scientifically true, and I was quite familiar with that literature when he made that.
What does that mean? Which populations suffered most from COVID?
There was a finding in the scientific publication that two different populations of people of Jewish ancestry, depending which line they're from, one was more heavily impacted than the other.
Mm-hmm.
And that was
Sephardic Ashkenazi.
Yes, and that was the finding. And I think the point that he was trying to make, or maybe didn't articulate well, is that the agent can be tailored to have that effect, and that's absolutely true. And that's through old gain of function technology. And with full synthetics, what I'm saying is you can make this so specific as that if I get your DNA, like off of, say that you threw a cup, I can tailor an agent just to you. And this is how it's changing. And if you're using AI behind that, I could then, and I say that I got a DNA sample from a couple of your relatives, so I knew what your family tree partially looked like. Machine learning is very good at actually random forest and tree decision making. You do a lot of complex AI behind this to figure out and make predictions that AI could about what your family tree looked like and have the disease travel through your family line.
Isn't that something? No surprise there. No surprise there. The truth shall set us free, but it will shock us in the meanwhile. So there's that one. Continuing now and finishing with the Real Deal Health segment here. Well, a lot of people seem to have anxiety disorders that seem to be on the rise. You could be one of them out there. A lot of people have trouble going in big crowds. A lot of people have trouble communicating, and some leaving the house. Well, let me tell you about this now. There seems to be a cause for anxiety altogether, and they're saying it's coming from phones. Well, this is a new study that's come out, and they ask, do you want to lower your anxiety now? Or they're saying, put your phone away. The longer we take breaks, the better our brains will be, experts have now said. Well, the anxious generation, in a new book, it's now just stating that there seems to be a spike in anxiety and depression altogether. And some of the people who are now feeling that effect is the new generation, Gen Z, as the spikes in anxiety and depression, namely the introduction of the smartphone and social media, it seems to be the cause. Well, the book points out the anxious generation, as they're now calling them, a public health campaign focused on challenging policy, culture, and behavior, led by the researcher himself, Mr. Haid, and his team. They keep track of legislatures around child phone use and creates documents that offer policy-making ideas, among other initiatives that could be healthy and a healthy alternative, but also a healthy choice for children and people altogether. Well, they're now saying that Gen Zs aren't the only ones affected by the smartphones and social media as we know it. They say everybody's feeling it. Everybody who serves as both everybody who takes part in managing their social media, their phones, their work, everybody's feeling a bit of this mental health, anxiety, and depression. And don't I know it? So they're now recommending put your phone away, put it on airplane mode, especially when you sleep. Take some time to be in nature because it seems to be on the rise like never before to no end. So there's a little real deal health tip for you. And I try to do that when I can. Well, now that finally brings us to some real deal tech, as now Amazon, just like Uber, is they're now taking a page from each other, scratching each other's back, and just having that mutual moment of bonding. Well, now the Amazon altogether plans to replace more than 500,000 jobs with robots. And we see this and saw this coming from miles and miles away. Yes, we did. UPS is now going that direction with Federal Express, service sector, the education sector. But let me tell you just a tad bit more now, as internal documents show the company that changed how people shop has a far-reaching plan to automate 75% of its entire operations. That's right. Over the past 2 decades, no company has done more to shape the American workplace, more than Jeff Bezos, Dr. Evil himself, more than Amazon. In its race to become the nation's second largest employer, it's hired hundreds of thousands of warehouse workers, built an army of contract drivers, and pioneered using technology to hire, monitor, and manage its employees. Well, now that seems to be a thing of the past, and it seems to be a thing of yesteryear. According to many of the people who are familiar with the workforce, well, Amazon's U.S. workforce has more than tripled since 2018 at almost a whopping 1.2 million. But Amazon's automation team expects that the company can avoid hiring more than 160,000 people in the United States would otherwise need by 2027. That would save about 30 cents on each item that Amazon picks, packs, and delivers to customers. So can you imagine that? Each worker is only just really worth 30 cents to them, and that's even then they want to save. Well, executives told Amazon's board last year that they hoped that the robotic automation would allow the company to continue to avoid adding to its U.S. workforce in the coming years, even though they expect to sell twice as many products by 2033. That would translate to more than 600,000 people whom Amazon didn't need to hire to begin with. So Amazon is now very convinced more than ever in closing that the automated future is around the corner, that they've started developing plans to migrate the fallout in communities that may lose jobs, but at least they'll save 30 cents to the dollar. Amazon.com for you. And then finally, this is a final study, is Real Deal Studies now, the final one here. Well, this one has to do with short men out there. And if you're short, just own it. And if you're already owning it, well, you might be one of the individuals that this study is now talking about. Well, they asked the question to begin with, does size really matter? Well, they're saying that it doesn't. Because short men, the walking style can make a smaller man appear just as intimidating as a large one. Interesting. Well, males unconsciously advertise their fighting ability through 2 simple movements, the study shows. Well, in a nutshell, this is what we've learned. Well, people judge dominance from the 3-4 second walk clips, size standards, avatars, and that's where you get the first impression from. Now, 2 motion cues stood out: side to side torso sway and holding shoulders out from the chest, so you can beat them just like that. Both added information beyond body size. Now, different mixes of size, sway, and shoulder position can lead to similar tough ratings. Smaller men can look just as intimidating as large ones. Now, the effect was modest on its own, they've said, but in a world of challenges, people who read cues and impressions for the first time say the way you sway, the way you walk, determines your toughness and determines, I guess, if the ladies will accept your offer to dance with them at the dancing floor. Because males, like the peacocks, are always in competition. We're always strutting. We always have something to display. We always have a true grit story with our physical communications, as our swagger is our style, and our style is in our attitude. And that's what makes you a tough man, not your height, not your eyeliners, J.D. Vance, but the way you walk. And that is the late night news to me. Okay, on that note, well, I want to thank you for joining me here tonight as we've learned about a lot here tonight. Really, I might have to watch this back myself as we now end the incoming invasion. And I hope that we share this moment as we just have a few more days left of the news radio edition. So I'm going to get out of here, and I want to I'll tell you, I'll be back tomorrow. We have a few things up our sleeve coming this weekend, but for that, and for the rest of us here at Real Deal Media's Late Night Update, I'm Dean Ryan, saying thank you for sharing a bit of your night. Until next time, always remember to stay tuned, and always remember to please stay awake. That's right. Good night, everybody.